Welcome, Ahlan wa Sahlan, Hoş geldiniz, Hon Becher Harten to the first session of the Kudra 2 Resilience Dialogue that will focus on localization of responses to the crisis in Syria and Iraq. My name is Eba Augustin. I'm the CEO of a company that supports philanthropy in the Arab world and founder of the Arab Country Facilitators Network. Together with Sami Hirani, I have the pleasure to lead you through the web-based dialogue for practitioners on challenges and successes in the response to the crisis in Syria and Iraq. This meeting will be held in English, Turkish, Arabic, Kurdish language, and for the choice of your language, please click on the bottom icon in the bottom bar. I will describe it a little bit further in a minute when we go into housekeeping. Before we have a closer look at the agenda of today's online meeting, I would like to give the floor for a welcome address to Michael Glück, the GIZ Program Director of Kudra 2. Please, Michael Glück, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. My name is Michael Glück, and I'm a GIZ Program Director of the Kudra 2 program. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's first session of our Resilience Dialogues. As we all know, in 2021, the crisis in Syria and its neighboring countries ended its 10th year. And the resolution of the crisis itself and its implication for the neighboring countries, including Iraq, which faces its own challenges, is not in sight. In March this year, many of us used the 10th anniversary of the uprising in Syria to reflect on the human costs of the crisis. But as professionals working to support affected communities, it is also an opportunity, perhaps an obligation is a better word, to reflect on what we have learned since the outbreak of the crisis. In many ways, the Kudra 2 program is very well positioned to facilitate this kind of reflection and exchange. The Kudra 2 program is co-funded by the EU Madad Fund, the governments of Germany and Spain, the biggest donors in the region, and all of which are represented today in this event. Under the umbrella of strengthening resilience of affected communities, Kudra 2 works in multiple sectors, such as education, protection, livelihoods, and basic services, with the cross-cutting objective of promoting social cohesion and stability. It's a multi-partner action, bringing together 5 European implementing partners, therefore kind of embodying a Team Europe approach. As Kudra 2 is a regional program, we are working in 4 countries, namely Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. That means we are working with a large number of national and local partners. One of our objectives is to capitalize on this diversity and promote dialogue for exchange and innovation within countries and across the region. With this series of resilience dialogues, we want to reflect on our own experiences, but also learn from our many partners in our cooperation countries, different setups, and other organizations with similar missions. We would like to ask, what are the challenges in the field, basically on the ground? What has worked and what hasn't? And if possible, why? What conclusions can we draw for future cooperation in the context of the protracted migration crisis? We will do so, it's planned, we will do so across 5 topical dialogues and 1 concluding session in which we will reflect results of the previous 5 and their implications for our work. We want these dialogues to be focused on the real issues, grounded in concrete implementation experiences, with the aim to identify useful recommendations for the future of our work. We hope that you will find this first session in which we will look into challenges of localizing of the crisis response a stimulating one. I find it particularly relevant to underline that today's panel represents all 4 of our partner countries of the Qudra 2 program. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you will join us in the future. Please make sure you do register for the subsequent sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael Glück. For a quick agenda review, we have already started with our kickoff and welcome note, which is followed by a panel discussion with experts from the field where participants give their input through the chat. So after the panel, the moderator will open the floor for participants to join the discussion, and we will close the thank you note and a short evaluation at 4:30 or 5:30 for everybody in the Arab world. Some housekeeping rules before we start with our panel discussion. To get started, in case you have technical issues, please send an email to contact@taymani.com for assistance. And the team will come back to you for assistance. Again, for the choice of language in our 4 languages, please click on the icon in the bottom bar. For questions and comments, use the chat interface on your Zoom screen. And I would like to encourage you to please actively participate during the panel discussion. Your comments and your questions will be selected and referred to by the panel moderator during the expert panel. Please abide by online etiquette or netiquette. And one final note that the meeting that you're participating in will be recorded. We would like to start our first dialogue webinar with a short visual introduction to frame the topic of localized aid for a more sustainable response. Please. She is a project manager from the Shabaka project, Expertise France in Lebanon. It is also a pleasure to have with us as a panelist Hero Anwar, the head of programs, rehabilitation, education and community health, who joins us from Iraq. Cemal Bash is the head of the project and financing department from the Turkish Union of Municipalities. Thanks for being with us. Linda Al-Kalash is the Executive Director from Tamkeen for Legal Aid and Human Rights. We are delighted to have her on board. She joins us for Sama Muharrab from Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development, who couldn't join us on a short notice. Mrs. Al-Kalash, great to have you with us. And from Qudra 2, the Program Director for the German Agency for International Cooperation, Michael Glück, from Qudra also joins us on the panel. The panel discussion will be moderated by Sami Hourani. He is a medical doctor by profession, but also a social entrepreneur, a multi-talent and excellent facilitator. Sami, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Abba, and thank you, our respected speakers. I would like to welcome you to our first episode of Qudra 2 Resilience Dialogues, More Localized Aid, or in the name or in the title of More Localized Aid for a More Sustainable Response. In the past couple of years, localization has gained currency, especially in the humanitarian field, since the 2016 World Humanitarian Summit, or what we call it WHS, resulting in what we call the Grand Bargain. In the context of the Grand Bargain, localization has mainly used to refer to increasing international investment in the capacity, delivery, and leadership of local responders. The text of the Grand Bargain calls for making principled action as local as possible and as international as necessary, while contributing to recognize the vital role of international actors. Today, we will expand the humanitarian focus to take a broader look at the efforts to promote resilience in the face of long-lasting crises. A localized response is assumed to be more effective and more sustainable as it draws on local knowledge and strengthens local capacities that remain in place. International support is welcomed, but the nature of that support and how it's delivered is crucial. That is what we want to discuss today based on the concrete experiences from Qudra 2 partner countries and our expert panelists. We are aiming to come up with more clear definition of what localization is, crystallized challenges, and reliable best practices. And above all, we want future beneficial and impactful recommendations. And those recommendations will go to our donor community and the international organization. Throughout our discussion, we encourage our audience who are being with us today to contribute with questions and comments in the chat area. And also they can use the Q&A function. We will come back to these questions during our Q&A session, which we're gonna put enough time for it. All comments and questions will be considered a summary report of our discussion, which will be shared with our audience after that. After I would say this not long introduction, I would like to welcome our speakers again. But before that, I want to start the session with a kickoff poll. This poll is to get our audience opinion on the subject. So in order to get this sense of mood from our audience, we have prepared two brief surveys, one right now, and then at the end of the session, we're going to have a feedback survey. The survey should be on the screen now. It's not a research or an academic research. It's just a perceptive survey where we're going to get how the audience think about it. I will go with the question and then I will read the options. So from your experience, which statement best describes the involvement of local actors in current projects and programs in your country? So the first option, local partners are in the driver's seat in all phases of the project/program cycle. The second option, from the program design to evaluation, local actors are partners with an equal voice in all matters of planning and implementation. The third choice, the expertise and priorities of local actors inform how international support is delivered. Their voice counts most of the time. The last one, local actors are just service providers who get paid to achieve project outputs and outcomes. As you can see, they are arranged from top down. The top one is the most engaging, most localized, till we reach the least localized option. We have around 30 seconds. You can press on the option that fits you or that you agree with the most, and we will get the results in 30 seconds from now. The control room should give me the results. While I am waiting for the results, I would like to welcome our respected speakers again, and just remind them that this is going to be a fast-paced session, 1 to 2 minutes for each question, and we will after that it's gonna be a bit more of a debate, and then after the session we're gonna come up with the tangible recommendations. It's very important for our audience to know that this is the first session of the Qudra 2 Resilience Dialogues, and as Mr. Michael has urged you to register for the coming sessions that will be in the coming weeks. We'll be waiting a bit for the results. I hear that they came. So the results are here. I'm more like in the feeling of beauty context results. It's not. It's very. It's exactly on the opposite side. So the results are 7% of our audience. They think that local partners are in the driver's seat, the most localized. 29% they think that from program to design to evaluation, local actors are partners with an equal voice. I will underline equal. 54% they think that the expertise and priorities of local partners inform how international support is delivered. Their voice counts most of the time. And 11% think that local partners are just service providers. So after sharing those results with you, I would like to start with our first speaker, Ms. Linda Kalash. And I would like to, Linda, are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah. Linda, she's director
of
the Tamkeen Center. And after sharing those results of the poll, as you can see, the majority, they think that the international support is delivered most of it, that the support and the voice of the local community is delivered most of the time. But before I get your comments on that, I would like to get to you and to prime this session with how do you define localization? And what does it mean to the Jordanian society?
Yes, localization for us, that to transfer from international intervention to local intervention, in general, and also to have, if we have international parties, to have equal partnership from the beginning, from co-creation of the proposal. And there's many reasons for this issue from the experience that happened, especially through the last 10 years with Syrian crisis and increase of INGOs in Jordan and the intervention by all international bodies in Jordan.
Sorry, what does it mean to the Jordanian society? Like, how important do you think localization is, and is it really like a big thing for the Jordanian society in general and civil society specifically?
Yes, of course, because if we are talking about sustainability of this, especially humanitarian response, it's very important to let the main role for local or INGO or NGOs in Jordan, civil society in Jordan or any country, local civil society, because they know about the country, about the field, what we need, and how to deal with people in general, and how to, and even the decision making will be centralized in the country, not to get approval from other and take this time and bureaucracy and this issue. So it's very important to have this this concern regarding to localization of especially humanitarian response. And even in advocacy, very important, because we noted that INGOs or international bodies, they have sensitive issue if they are working on advocacy or accountability, or but the civil society or local civil society, they have this ability to raise the issue, to make advocacy, to talk about everything without any sensitivity or diplomatic issue regarding to the response of the government or.
Yeah. I mean, if I want to summarize what you have mentioned, Linda, you're more, I mean, you started with sustainability, but also you tapped into efficiency and effectiveness of the civil society. And this is something that we would like to also hear from our speakers on it. But before I move to
Sami, can I add something? Only example for COVID-19, for example. Through this, we found that civil society organization with limited resources, they start or they moved early for to respond to the COVID-19 crisis and what happened. The INGOs or international bodies or they start to move after I think 1 month or 2 months to start discussion how they will intervene.
Yeah. I'll go back to you with the challenges. However, I'm going to move to our next speaker, Hero from Iraq. And I remember that in the preparation of our discussion today, you said that localization is like a passion project for you. And REACH, your organization, works with large number of international actors in Iraq. So tapping into your passion, how do you see the challenges? Linda talked about localization, how important it is, how it contributes to more efficient, effective civil society. But what are the challenges that you foresee in Iraq in order to achieve a localized response?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I think the challenges are on like two sides. Some challenges are from the partners, funding partners and donors from their side, and some challenges from our side as local and national NGOs. For the donors and funding partners, the challenges are the trust and confidence. They don't have, I don't mean all of them, but I mean some of them. They don't have enough trust and confidence in our capacity, especially when it comes to the international standards. And they don't have enough trust in our transparency and accountability. So that's the big one. Plus, some of them are afraid of power. They think that if like localization is practiced or is there in place, they lose power. That's how we see it. Of course, there are some details. Even there's some ego in it for some individuals. So these.
I want to know more about this ego thing. What do you mean? Can you elaborate?
Well, yeah. Well, you know what? Like localization means equality. You know, it means equal partnership. It means doing things together. It means we are all the same. I mean, maybe like I don't like to say us and them, but just to make it easier, maybe we have some qualifications and skills and we don't have some others. And then it's the opposite, like INGOs have some capacity and skills that we don't have. So together we can complement each other. Like that's the correct way. But some see it as we are the second-class citizen. They are here and we are here. So by us to get some power and to be equal, they think that they lose their power. We take it from them. You know, so that's not all of them, but there are individuals who see it in this way, and even they use like they are rude sometimes, or they don't use a polite language in communication with us, even the tone. Again, not all of them, but you know, that's the ego side.
Yeah.
And how come we are equal? You know, they think it's like kufr in Islam. You know, like it's forbidden. How come?
Yeah. So please, I stopped you while you were talking about the challenges. So you stopped with the ego.
Yeah. And then part of the challenges is from our side as the national and local NGOs. I mean, some of us, like still we haven't spent enough time or enough like efforts on strengthening our capacity. I know part of it is because of the resources, but part of it maybe we haven't given priority. And some of the NGOs, they know the principles, but they don't follow it for some reason. So like, you know, we give some like gaps or some like, there are things that we don't work on it, and then it will be a reason for some or an excuse for others to say you are not good enough. You cannot do what you think you do. So I mean, from our side, and the other challenge is we are not united. I mean, it's wrong to say united, sorry. We don't have a unified or united voice as local and national NGOs in Iraq. I think that's another challenge that make us less strong to advocate for localization. Though thanks to NCCI, that's a network for Iraqi and international NGOs. So we do some advocacy through NCCI, but of course it will be more powerful and stronger and more effective if we have our own network. Over to you.
With all those challenges that you have mentioned, that goes on the side of the Iraqi civil society, do you think that the local society in Iraq or civil society in Iraq is ready for localization? I mean, you mentioned not having a unified voice. You mentioned an issue of capacity. And then we're asking for localization. Do you think we're ready for that?
Well, we are not like quite ready. We are not completely ready, but we are working on it. So like, you know, we are at different levels. Some NGOs have more capacity, some others less capacity. But I think if we believe in helping each other out and working on it together, and of course there are good partners, good funding partners and donors who are ready, or they are ready to help us. So together we can overcome it. Together we can be ready. But right now I don't think we are ready. We have just started working on it, but I'm optimistic that there are a number of opportunities and a number of INGOs and some UN agencies who are ready to help, and some donors in Iraq, that all together we can have progress. And that's how I see it.
I'll stop you where you said optimistic. I'll come back to you with a question on optimism. But before that, I'm going to move to Jamal from Turkey. He's joining us. And we're going to move to another subject where, you know, usually the localization debate focuses on civil society and maybe local actors, but also local authorities and municipalities. They play a huge role in making this dream happen and in delivering a lot of the civil society work and the international organization to practice. So taking the Turkish context and zooming into it, do you think their role has been overlooked? Like when we talk about localization, do you think the local municipalities, the local authorities have been in a way marginalized? And if it's the case, is it changing or not?
Well, thank you very much, Sami. Thanks for inviting me for this panel as well. Well, concerning the Turkish local authorities, what I can say is the approach, the difference of the approach from the local perspective and the national perspective. So I can also relate that question to what we do in Kudra project as well. The reason is, when you are a central government, you can create one fit for all program. For example, if you're a Ministry of Health, you can make a one fit for all program and imply it in all hospitals. Or if you're a Ministry of Education at a central level, you can create a one fit for all training program, and you can go with that program all over the country with migrants from age 5 to 15 or whatever the range you put in. But when you talk about the local perspective, you cannot do that, because let's say if there is 1,400 municipality in Turkey, that means you need 1,400 different approach to solve the local problems. That's what we thought that we should do in Kudra project. And we sat down with the GIZ team, along with the experts from Union of Turkish Municipalities. And then we said, let's allow local authorities to analyze their own local problems. And then let's give them opportunity to solve those problems with their own approach, because no one else from the central level can understand the situation better than the local authorities. That also has an impact on the level of localization in the country as well. Because if the local authorities are able to do, for example, in Turkey, local authorities are doing the social work, they're doing the infrastructure work, they have a wide range of tasks, so they deal with the migration issue up front. But then they also realize the problem, but each problem has a different solution. So in my case, the importance of localization in migration issue is understanding the reality and a difference of each local problems, and then work on a different aspects to solve them.
That's great to hear. And that drives me to the second question, which is I mean, we see that I totally agree with you that there is no size fits all, and we can see that there are more response from the local authorities in Turkey. But is there any response? Like, do you see the local authorities and municipalities working with the international organizations and donors? I would say in a more cooperative way, or are they synced together or not?
Well, let's put it this way. It is now better than what it was back in 2011. So we are not, I don't think we're at the desired level where we should be, where all the CSOs cooperating with all the local authorities, where all the international donor organizations working with central government organizations, local authorities, they exchange the data, they exchange the information, and then let's say a cooperative approach is implemented at the local level. We are not actually at that stage yet, but what I can say is doing projects with CSOs, teach to CSOs, and it's also teach to local authorities. Doing a project with international donor organizations, it teaches international donor organizations the reality of the ground, and it also teaches local authorities about the agendas and policies up at the global level. So they all learn from one another. And when that capacity increases, then we see the more local authorities learn, the more donor organizations learn each other, they tend to work more, create more projects.
I really liked how you framed it in a context where there is more of like continuous exchange of skills, exchange of experiences, approaches, tools, and so on. And from Turkey, I'm going to move to Lebanon, to Nadine, who is working on Shabaki program and have been working on strengthening localization in Lebanon. I want to start with asking you, do you relate to what have been said? Do you see or the situation in Lebanon is quite different? And before I go into that, if I want to ask you the poll question, what will be your answer?
Thank you, Sami. I was quite surprised actually with the responses to the poll. I felt like they were quite optimistic, but then everyone sees things from their perspective. To answer your question, I think definitely there's some resonating and there's some connections with what everyone's been describing from their respective countries. I can especially relate to what Hiro was saying in Iraq, speaking from my experience as a professional, but also within the Shabaka project and our experience in Shabaka so far, is that it's really about having the conversation of this equality in partnership, or even equity in partnership, because there is complementarity that can be there. I absolutely agree with that. The Shabaka project, for those who don't know, focuses specifically on civil society and localization. However, there's also some other areas that can translate when it comes to local authority. The only thing that would be different, I would say, is the context of Lebanon, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. The challenges that we face in terms of localized action are compounded with the multiple crises that have hit Lebanon in 2020. And I mean, you could go all the way back to the civil war and build up to how we are where we are now. But in 2020, you're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, complete collapse of the economic and financial sector, political insecurity, and then the Beirut port explosions, which launched this massive humanitarian context. So imagine all the challenges for localization, and then running into 2020 and how that led us to where we are now. So yes, definitely a lot of similarities with a lot of intricate differences that are relative specifically to the context of Lebanon.
Beyond the challenges that you have mentioned, do you see any other challenges that were not mentioned by our speakers?
I would say also it's an issue of mutual responsibility here. Yes, there's challenges when it comes to, for me at the core, it's about will and intent from all sides and from all stakeholders. So that is one challenge that it's relating to trust, not in terms of how people handle funds and transparency, but also trust and intentions. And that cannot happen without there being a very clear and sort of open conversation. And the fact remains that as long as civil society organizations exist in fear of collapse, then they're unable to actually take the step forward to have the trust of, if we don't succeed in this discussion, we're going to fall apart. So there needs to be at least a minimum level of sustainability and financial viability for the conversations to progress towards, let's talk about equal negotiations, equal partnerships, and etc. So, and this goes back to responsibility, not just on external actors, but also on multiple factors as well. One of them is political here in Lebanon. Others are relating to also the public and public trust, whether in civil society organizations or local authorities as well.
Well said. And I'll come back to you for what is the way forward and what can be the entry points to address those challenges. But I will go back to Linda, our first speaker. Nadine have been addressing the issue of sustainability several times as challenges and the fear of collapse and the fear of not continuing the activities. And I didn't zoom with you into the challenges of a localized response in Jordan. I would like you to comment on that, and then after that, we're going to move into how we can solve this issue and how can be more optimistic, as Hera has said before.
Yes, I think it's good as the other colleagues mentioned about build the capacity of CSOs, but real capacity building, and second, to have equal partnership with the civil society organization, not implementing part. Third, it's very important to stop to play the role of guardianship on the local on the civil society organization. For sustainability, I think civil society organization can more sustainable than INGOs, because if we are talking about INGOs, we are talking about different type of INGOs. We have small INGOs and big INGOs. Some of them, they came to our country to implement only one project for 1 year or 2 years and return back without completing this work. But I think in this case, it's very important to have equal partner to participate even in the writing of the project. Second, it's very important to provide the civil society organization skills about technical writing, especially for proposal. Third, I think it's very important to talk about the field and about the knowledge of civil society organization in the field and what we need, requirements for this, and they can be more sustainable in this work.
Yeah, I know that you moved into giving us recommendations and the way forward, but before that, I was just informed that we have a sound issue, that we need around 5 seconds just of to freeze the session for 5 seconds till they do a sound check and sound amendments or changes. So bear with me, our guest speakers, for 5 seconds, and the audience. Okay, I just informed that they did it, so it was fast. Moving from challenges, and as I promised her that when she was talking about optimism, that I will go back to her and hear more about if there is light at the end of this tunnel, how we can see this light, and what are some of the success stories that we can build on.
Yeah, thank you. Well, like there's change. So for me, that's encouraging. Like in 2017, when it was the first time for me to be a part of a localization group and go outside the country to learn about that and with others. In Iraq, I didn't hear about it. It was very few people were talking about it. Not only local and national NGOs, but like others, INGOs, except 1 or 2 INGOs, like UN agencies. You won't believe if I tell you in 2000, it was 2018 or 19, I asked one of the UN agencies to do a workshop for us about grand bargain, and the country representative very honestly said, let us learn about it and then we tell you about it. So they didn't know about it. They just heard the words, but without like knowing about it or without practicing it or any follow-up from their HQs. And of course, a number of reasons. One of them is like we as Iraqi NGOs, national NGOs, we work together. And I think there's another reason within HCT, Humanitarian Country Team, the local and NGOs, we advocated together. And thanks to the Grand Bargain Localization work stream, one of the visits, they visited 3 countries 2 years ago, and one of the countries was Iraq. So having their delegation, I think it was a reminder and then raise awareness and made some groups, like, you know, some agencies feel, okay, we need to start, we need to do something. So because of them, the word localization and grand bargain was added to the humanitarian country team vocabulary. And there have been more work, and it's kind of like together. I don't mean only that, but with the other efforts, we have like, there's a momentum. It's not fast enough as much as we like. I mean, it doesn't meet our expectation, but there's kind of momentum compared with the past. And thanks to some NGOs that they are working on educating the Iraqi NGOs to learn about localization, because if you don't know our rights, we don't ask for it. It's like, it's similar to women's rights. And so like gradually there have been some change, some shifts. And I talk about one example because of the time. The IHF, or a country-based pool fund. In each country, it has the name of the country. In Iraq Humanitarian Fund. Like it made some change gradually because of the advocacy, our advocacy altogether. They asked they tried few things. Once they announced only for local NGOs, local and national NGOs, and later we didn't like that, so they tried something else to have consortium, like on consortium based, not to give the fund only to the NGOs, because in the competition they got more. And then they made a condition to have an Iraqi NGO in all consortium, otherwise they don't get it. And gradually they add, last year they had that, this year they added some words of localization and some.
You're seeing more progress from the international organizations and the donors.
Yeah.
You would describe it as it's there, it's happening, but it's not fast enough. And still it does not meet your expectations. And from that, I'm going to move to the other side, where the international organizations, and to Michael, who's this Qudra's second program. As you know, the project is large, complex, and regional. It's not easy, but you have been, I would say, on that side today, the donor international side, where, as Eros just said, they're expecting more fast-paced, more. They're expecting a lot from that. So, to start with the question, what role do large internationally operating organizations such as GIZ have to play in localization? Discussing what we have been, or tackling what we have been discussing before, and how does Qudra 2 promote this in particular?
Yeah, hope you can hear me. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I mean, I'm listening and at the moment to different opinions and statements, and I found that very, very interesting. I mean, that's how I start this first. As Qudra, let me first give 1 or 2 explanations. I mean, first to my person, I started working with NGOs. Now I've been working for some years with GIZ, so I know a bit of both sides. Yeah, I think so. Today, I would like to talk a little bit, when we talk about Qudra, is the support to local organizations, but with a special focus on local governments. Yeah, what I'm trying to do is, at the moment, I'm trying to pick up the opinions and statements, and I'm trying to put that into the context of our work. And what comes to my mind is that we have been working in Iraq, yeah, for a number of years now, where I find we have quite a nice, let's say, localized way of implementing. There is an approach which takes into account local demands. Going 2 steps back, I mean, what is an international organization doing? I mean, we are not coming with, how would I say, a white piece of paper and say, okay, now let's sit together in a very flexible way and see how we can address all these needs. I mean, I only can ask for understanding that a program like Kudra has been designed after consultations with a number of partners, but it limits its interventions. Yeah, it's not everything under the sun which is possible. So that gives us a frame, and within that frame, we can move. So it's the old discussion, I mean, about the what do we support, or what is supported through GIZ or Kudra, and the how. So for me, it's still the question, I mean, do we talk today about more about the how, to localize it, to localize our objective? Because I believe also it makes it more efficient, it makes it more, let's say, it makes it more sustainable. And that brings me to what GIZ is doing now. I mean, I guess that's what GIZ stands for. We are really focusing, I would say, on capacity development. Some people call it strengthening. In the literature, I'm reading about capacity sharing, yeah, which I think is a nice terminology, because it puts away this usual top-down, we are here to help, and there's nothing we can build upon. So this is something, as GIZ, I mean, what I can say, we are very much focused on. We are also, as GIZ, trying to be, as my colleagues call it, I mean, a go-between, I would say, yeah, between the different levels. No? We have donors, we have implementing partners, we have national partners, we have local partners, all the way through. Of a systemic perspective. Yeah, if I support local level, if I work on eye level, what does it have in terms of an impact? Yeah, I mean, if we work with TBB, for example, or JCC, yeah, we have found partners which are on a higher level, which we need in our work. Yeah, but I mean, for me, it would be interesting to come up with some recommendations how to link the different levels. Yeah, to look at it without now sounding abstract or complex, yeah, but having a bit of a systemic approach. Yeah. So one last sentence, if I may. Okay. We do come with systems, of course, and I guess we have to understand that we are not that flexible as international donors, but we do bring our own, how would I call, systems of the country of origin. Yeah. Yeah. So, and there is an accountability. Yeah, there are regulations, and this quite often, to my experience over decades, is sometimes perceived as a mistrust, which it isn't. Yeah, we just have to fulfill 2 systems we're working in. Thank you.
I would like, first of all, GIZ have been one of the pioneer organizations in addressing the issue of localization, and I think the session today is a great example of that. But I want to come back to you with a follow-up question on what you have said, Mr. Michael, which is the international organization and the donors, or some of them, they're really working hard to implement localizations. But if you want to go to the other side, do you think that the local organizations or the local civil society, from your experience, are they ready for that? Let's be genuinely speaking, like really, like, what do you think?
You mean if organizations on local level are ready for
localization, and they can they do or play a bigger role in that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And I guess our job should also be to build capacities in a sense that we speak the same language, we understand each other, and then this follows trust, I believe. Yeah. So But yeah, trust is a key word, but it's also understanding the different systems which are meeting in one place. If it is on a regional, national, or local level. When I read the literature about localizations, I mean, the definitions are quite varied, no? And I mean, and the levels are quite varied, and the actors. So it's a matter of trust. GIZ, I mean, has been working. First of all, we are not a donor. No, we have to make that clear. Yeah, we are not. We don't give the money. We are just working with partners. The money comes from somewhere else. So I believe, and it's a question we are talking about here. I think the group which is sitting together at the moment here today is what I can see where we are coming from a humanitarian direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look at the development, the other side of the nexus, I think this the localization is, for me, I mean, how would I say? It's a must. Yeah, and it's not the instrumentalization of NGO and INGOs just to be contractors. Certainly not. Yeah. So I would like to underline that. Yeah.
I would definitely underline and highlight that sentence, that localization is a must, and go back to Nadine. And Mr. Michael has just mentioned that localization is a must, especially when it comes to the development sector. Do you think localization or do you think that the realization of localization or making localization possible is something that we can expect? Do you think it's something that we can see? And if it is the case, what are the entry points that you can see, whether in Lebanon or in the region?
I mean, absolutely. I think it's possible. Again, like Michael was saying, the question is how. As far as the literature that I've been looking at, localization as a term has been around since the maybe 1990s, even talking about post-conflict societies and localization. And so it didn't just start with the WHS, but even with WHS, 5 years on, you see the reviews on the progress, and it's quite disappointing. So the answer is yes, of course, but then the question of how is much more complex. But the simplest of terms is really about, like I say again, intent and will, but also demonstrating in practice. And I'll give the example of the Shabake project. I mean, Expertise France is a government agency. The Shabake project is similar to GIZ. So the Shabake project is funded by AFD and the Danish cooperation, who have a strategic intent to promote localization, but through action. Through the projects that we are working on, we promote localization. So we have a component of Shabake where we're advocating for the localization agenda, but also the other components, a big part of the fund goes towards capacity development. And I really would like to distinguish between capacity development and investing in strengthening or building upon strengths and simply training on compliance. A lot of donors or funders kind of conflate these two things, that as an organization, if I'm working with a local partner on how they can do financial reporting and financial systems as they suit my guidelines, that is called capacity development. But that's absolutely not true, because it's very context-specific stuff that are very relevant. And this is the thing here, as long as what we need to shift the lens that we are all wearing here, because it is, again, a mutual collaboration. Local organizations, again, I'm talking about civil society here, they are the experts when it comes to the communities. They have access to the communities. They demonstrate a cultural, contextualized best practice. You have the funders or donor entities or international organizations that bring with them resources and also best practices that can be shared as well. So the international entities or the international side cannot do what they want to do if the local actors weren't there, and vice versa. The fear that local actors have is as soon as a new crisis appears on some other parts of the globe, the attention will be shifted and they're left with what they need to do. So again, if I could sum it up with one thing, localization has a lot of subsets within it, but capacity development here is key, and beyond the concept of just training. You know, people say they're being trained to death. You're talking about peer-to-peer exchange, you're talking about twinning, you're talking about coaching, and so it means the projects should be longer, the funds invested should be greater, and also keeping an eye on, obviously, work with beneficiaries on the ground and communities in need. But if you remove this part and say it's not financially efficient, over the long run it is. And this is something that is very clear, I think, to everybody.
Thank you, Nadine, for your remarks. And I think after this session, we have been, I would say, quite there when it comes to the diagnosis or the definition of localization, looking at the challenges and also ways of success. But if I want to go to our panelists one by one and ask you about what are the key success factors that international organizations can support you with or help you with, what is needed really or concretely from the international organizations to achieve localization? And this question is not only right now for our speakers here or panelists, it's also for our great audience who have been following us since the beginning. I would like you to think about it. What are the concrete needs or recommendations that we can send to our donor and international community? But you can put your answers through the chat, and maybe we can also continue on that in the Q's and A's panel. But I would start with Linda. What do you think? What is needed concretely to achieve localization in less than a minute?
Yes. It's I think two messages. One of them to the donors to focus on civil society organization, and to be aware that they can do this, they can work in the field, they know the requirements, they know how to deal with the population in general. For INGOs, if they are they have to make equal partnership with the civil society organization from the beginning, from the writing the proposal. Second, to build the capacity of the civil society organization in some sides, maybe sometime like administrative issue or financial issue, M&A, and this issue to provide real capacity building for them. And as I mentioned before, it's very important to not play the guardianship role in the civil society organization, and also don't deal with them as lower class and also as only implementing partner. Yes.
Thank you, Linda. I'll move to Jamal with what is needed concretely and your recommendations.
Thank you, Sami. My recommendation would be, as we localize the tasks, as we localize the solutions, when we talk about the international donors and international agencies, I think we should work more on the localization of global policies, localization of the global agendas as well, because when we create proposals for donor organizations, we need to speak the same language. Therefore, the localization of the SDGs, localization of the Paris Agenda, the Sendai Agenda, the New Urban Agenda should be localized and owned by local authorities. I'm very sorry, I have to leave for another meeting. So thanks for having me again.
I would like to thank our speaker, Jamal. I know that he has a commitment that he needs to leave us. But thank you for your feedback, and thank you for your recommendation, and thank you for your presence with us. So moving to Errol, I think Jamal has said very interesting points here, that it's not only about localization of humanitarian aspect or development, but it's also on the policy level, which and the frameworks that controls the whole development and humanitarian aspect. In your opinion, what is I think Linda, Jamal, and during the past session, we have been talking about a lot of needs from the donor community, but what is more than what we have said already? What is needed from the international organizations?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I agree with what the other colleague said in this regard, and I like to add to that. There are so many things, but to select the one that they are more important, like to educate and raise awareness, train their staff members not only in the HQ, but in the country offices, like, I mean, INGOs, UN agencies, donors, all of them. Yeah, because we have seen that. It's a piece of paper there, they sign it, but then the country office doesn't know about it. If they know about it, they don't use it. And then there's no follow-up. Like, to be a part, if they really care about why it's not a part of their performance review, of their appraisal. And so that's one. And then to be like to select few of the commitments. If they cannot work on all of them, as a first step, to select few commitments. For example, long-term project for local NGOs. As the other colleague said, the other panelists, like real capacity development or capacity strengthening, not ticking the boxes. And then these policies, these procedures that they put to be to be realistic. I mean, as Jamal said, localized or at least realistic, like to make here. You cannot copy and paste whatever you have in another country and expect here in Iraq we do it. So because of the time, I stop here.
Just to sum up, I mean, you're talking about like more taking things to action, and especially at the local level, and making it happen, but also putting it as a priority. I would move to Nadine. What is your intake here?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't unmute my microphone. If I were to add something to what's being said already, again, we can talk about this for hours. I mean, this is like my bread and butter here. But if I were to add something, what international stakeholders can do is exactly what this webinar is doing, which is actually bringing together different stakeholders to have the conversation, local and international, of how we can implement localization. Typically, you find that the discussions on the WHS itself and how we can implement the localization is a conversation that has been restricted to international actors saying, how can we do this, and talking amongst each other. And so I think one important step is to invite all parties and the entities that we have committed to provide localized action to be involved in the conversation of how, not just the fact that, hello, we're going to do localized action, we know you want it, do you know what I mean? And this is something that we're trying to do here in Lebanon. It's harder, much more complex, requires much more effort, but to kind of, if we can have a national dialogue with local actors and with the entities that are the signatories of the Grand Bargain, which have made a commitment to have the conversation and to start from there to say how we want to do it and to listen to feedback from all sides, that's a pretty good first step.
Well, thank you, Nadine, and big thanks to our speakers. I'm going to move to the Q&A session where we can receive more comments and questions to our speakers and more to elaborate the discussion to our audience. The idea that our audience is participating through chat. I'll be receiving some of the questions through chat from our control room, and those comments and questions will be conveyed to our respected speakers. We're not going to have a lot of time, most likely around 9 to 10 minutes to come up to conclude the Q&A session and then move to the final remarks. So I encourage our audience to put their comments or ideas so we can push this discussion forward. Till I receive the discussions, I think most of the discussion has been going into putting localization as a priority, taking it from the narrative to action, creating the tools and creating the and moving to the how in order to make it a reality. Till we get the chat, I think I was personally curious about asking some of the speakers here on some of the success stories or some of the things that can that we can leave the session with having some optimism and some, I would say, a smile on our faces. I think Nadine has been nodding you have been nodding your head. It seems that you have a real success story that, or something that can provide us with some optimism here.
You know, on some level, I wish that our partners were here to actually share these stories instead of myself, because I represent Expertise France in this context. But we have been getting, I mean, it's always important to receive constructive criticism from our partners, which we often do, but also in terms of positive feedback, a lot of the partners we work with have actually told us this is the first project that we are working on, where a big part of it is non-project related. It's not about their implementation on the ground. The support towards equipment purchase, rehabilitation of their structures and their systems, software, capacity development through provision of expertise. For them, they were very pleased to see that, and over time, they would give us small stories. For example, one of our partners recently shared with us that the government is now doing distribution of vaccinations for elderly populations, and the Ministry of Public Health reached out to these civil society organizations saying, can you help us administratively? And one of our partners was involved in this, and they said that the equipment that they procured through this project, which they wouldn't have been able to get otherwise, was used for this initiative, and it made them a stronger representative in terms of supporting local authorities when it comes to this administrative type of work. So the linkages and the of it are far-fetched. They're not just for the organization itself, but also in terms of its collaborations with other entities. So that was a very positive thing to hear. And if they were here with us, they would also share more positive feedback, but also a lot more thoughts about how we can be doing it better.
And that's great to hear that some of what we have been discussing is reality already, and it's happening and taking place. I know that also Linda has, you know, when we were talking about the session, she told me, like, you know, yes, localization can be as a theory, but also we practice this in our work. So Linda, can you share with us, till we get the comments and the questions from the audience, that you told me that you have already started implementing localization, and you have action that you have been doing in the past couple of years.
Yes, of course, we start to work on this, and in Jordan also we have a coalition, JONAF, called JONAF, and we are working on this issue with the 40 organization, and we have our response to humanitarian issues. From other side, as our organization Tamkeen, when we have partnership with the INGO, we put condition for this to be equal partner, and also to co-create the proposal together, and not as the implementing organization, but as equal partner organization. I think we can achieve to this in general, because as I mentioned before, we know more about what happened in the field, and we know how to deal with the government. At the same time, also I have something regarding to experts that they came directly with the INGOs. We noted that all of them from outside, and the cost will be high. So if we are talking about implementing project or funding for inside the country, we find that a big part of this fund will go to the expert, and at the same time they don't know about what in our countries and what our requirements. So yeah. I think we can implement and we can go for localization if we have response from INGOs and from the donors at the same time.
So, since I'm still with you here, there was a comment on people were interested to know JONAF and also the NCCI in Iraq, and the question was, do they receive external support from donors? Is it something that we desire, that such coalitions also sponsored by donors or supported by donors? I start with Linda because I would say you have a mic virtually. But and in like less than 30 seconds. Do you receive external support for JONAF?
Yes, we receive support for JONAF for response to COVID-19 crisis in last April.
Yeah, and do you think this is something desired by JONAF to have being supported by the donors on the localization issue?
Not yet, but we are working on this.
Moving to Hera, the NCCI network in Iraq. What do you think? Do you receive donor money, and do you desire that?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I understand your question.
There was a question about the platform, which is NCCI in Iraq.
Okay.
And the question is, do you receive donors' money? And if you desire the idea of receiving money, do you like it?
As NCCI?
Yeah.
Receiving it? Yeah. Well, just to explain that REACH is a member of NCCI, a member organization. But NCCI has staff members that they get salary, and there's it's a network. NCCI receive donor money and funding partners, and they spend that money on keeping that structure that advocate for all of us in Iraq, for all the Iraqi NGOs and INGOs. And NCCI doesn't channel money to the local NGOs because that's not the mandate of NCCI. And actually, we are all each member has a voice in NCCI. So collectively, we haven't asked that from NCCI, but indirectly, NCCI help us in getting money, not channeling money, through introducing us to INGOs, through raising awareness, training courses, and the most important thing that NCCI is doing, one of the most important things, that because of NCCI, Iraqi NGOs can be a member of HCT humanitarian candidate team, high positions like co-chairs in the clusters, and all the big forums. So that's really
okay.
Great opportunity.
That's great to hear about all the great work that NCCI is doing in Iraq. I'll move to the second question, which is an interesting question. It says, how to make sure that localization does not accidentally finance clientelism? In other words, support LNGOs connected to political parties. I cannot see better than Nadine to answer on this when it comes to, because in Lebanon, I think this is something that can be relevant. So what do you think?
I think the challenges with clientelism or politically affiliated organizations have existed long before the conversation around localization. And it is in fact a good question of whether localization can become a tool to further exacerbate this issue. The fact is that in a country like Lebanon, and I think other Arab countries as well, there are a lot of foundations and organizations that have been established by certain political entities or etc. I think the key here is transparency. And this is a thing that oftentimes international actors struggle to understand. There's a local context here at play. When you find a board, the members are from maybe the members have been around for a very long time. It's very counter to best practice. There's kind of a middle ground that we need to find. There's some cultural specificities that we need to adapt to as well while promoting best practice. At the end of the day, the key here is transparency. If there is an organization that is somehow related to any former politician or member or their family member or whatever, if we are transparent about how we conduct our activities and how our funds are, and this responsibility also lies on international agencies as well. I mean, the concepts of corruption, etc., does not lie just within local entities, and I think this has been demonstrated throughout history. And so the key here is communication, transparency, and committing to best practice when it comes to showcasing and monitoring how funds come in and how they go.
Thank you for this, I would say, comprehensive answer for this important question. As a matter of fact, our session is about to finish. And before we end our session, I would always like to have final remarks by our speakers. So just like one sentence, I would start with Linda, since she's the one we started with. Your final remarks on the issue. Less than a minute, dear.
Yes, I hope to go forward for localization and to especially in humanitarian response, localization and agenda, and localization and partnership, and in even with the government.
Thank you. I'll move to Era.
Yeah, I say localization in some ways looks like peace for me. People say peace is a dream. Peace is not possible, but I say it's possible. So localization is possible. It's a long way. It's a long road. We need to work on it, believe in it, and celebrate the little steps that we achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine, and then Michael.
I think, yeah, just as a final comment, a big part of continuing on this path is really dialogue and awareness, from the most basic level of actually promoting what localization actually means. Some entities still are not aware of the definition or have very differing definitions, as Michael mentioned before. So dialogue is important, awareness is important, advocacy on the topic is important, and then of course going into the details of how and what and when. So continuing the dialogue here is very key, which means thank you so much for this session, for these resilience dialogues. I think they're very important.
Thank you, Nadine. Michael.
Yeah, for me it was very interesting. I mean, what I would like to leave behind is that it has said before, I think capacity strength, yeah, also to localization. And I also would like to stress again that everybody who is involved in this cooperation, partnerships, and so on, need to understand, where the different parties come from. Yeah. So this is for me very important. The moment you enter a contractual arrangement, yeah, you talk about not only transparency but also accountability. We live with that. I cannot change that. So we need your also understanding, yeah, that we do the job together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And by the end of this session, I would like to ask our speakers, our audience, and also the organizing team for their great work in organizing such a panel. And I would hand the mic to Abba to continue the schedule with you. And thank you very much on the behalf of all the organizing committee. And I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Sami Horani. And thanks specifically, of course, all to our panelists that have contributed to this very interesting and deep discussion. I apologize again for the initial hiccups. I'm glad I didn't have a cat filter on. We have a pretty difficult setup, and there were really interferences which I couldn't eliminate so quickly. So thanks for your understanding. So our first online resilience dialogue comes to a close. And before I try to summarize the main point of the discussion, I have been keeping track as much as I could. I would like to give the floor to Maxime Montagnier from the International Cooperation Officer from the European Union Regional Trust Fund in response to the Syrian crisis for his observations and his closing remarks.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. And from my side also, I would like to thank first of all the panelists for all your views and your recommendations, but also Kudra for providing the space for dialogue in this time. We all know that it's not very easy with this pandemic to discuss and to capitalize good experience. And I look forward that next time, maybe next year, we'll be able to meet all together physically. What I have heard today remind me very much what an event that we organized in Brussels in September 19, where we managed to gather more than 200 practitioners from the countries in the Middle East, but also from Europe here in Brussels. And we organize workshop at sectoral level to have some lesson learned on interventions. Maybe 2 words on the EU Trust Fund in response to the Syrian crisis. So we have been created 5 years ago. It's a trust fund that is pooling resources from different donors. It's managed by the European Commission. And since our creation, we have funded more than 100 projects in the region, including Kudra 2, for instance, obviously. And all these projects, the main objective is to provide basic services for refugees and also for host communities, but at the same time to try to strengthen the system for service delivery, so that we are not only a crisis instrument, but we want to support also the communities and the local institution and the countries to also try to take advantage of this crisis. So, and if we want to strengthen the system for service delivery, we have to work with local stakeholders, not only civil society organizations, but also local authorities and centers, for instance, primary health centers, social development centers, and for that we need and we should work with local stakeholders. And what we have learned over these 5 years is in the design of a project is that at the beginning of our interventions, majority of our projects were designed at the regional scale level, but now more and more they are designed at national level with stronger involvement from our local stakeholder. And for all the European Commission, this is one of the key elements that we have to take into account when we want to assess a new project. So once again, many thanks, and I look forward participating in the upcoming session of this web dialogue, and I guess the next one will be on service delivery, so in July. So I look forward to see you once again, and I hope we will have a lot of participants. Thanks a lot, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Montagnier, Mr. Montagnier. So I have been trying to keep up as much as I could during the discussion. So initially we looked at the challenges, and there were quite a number of them, and you prioritized them surprisingly, but very interestingly. There is really some of the challenges to pull them out. There is no united front of civil society. For example, that was an issue in Iraq. You were talking about the capacities of the different partners that they are struggling with this. It was clear that there is no one size fits all. So Mr. Gluck pointed out that really there is a need for different approaches because the situation on the ground and the partners are different. You pointed out, Nadine, the very difficult compounding, really, crisis situation in Lebanon and how tricky it is under these extremely difficult conditions to pursue a localization strategy. Lebanon is also a case, but other countries as well, when it comes to challenges where the approach of localization could be used to strengthen clientelism, political affiliation could be strengthened. So these are difficulties and challenges. Then what is needed? And you came up with quite a number of interesting suggestions. One issue that was mentioned by Michael Gluck was that trust really is a key word that binds the different partners together, because without trust, it's very difficult to answer needs and to also be regional and location specific. There need to be an understanding of the different systems on the different levels in society that is crucial. Several times you pointed out from the different country perspective that there really needs to be a real partnership, quote unquote, a partnership with is accepting the local civil society organizations as partners of equals. That was pointed out a number of times. There is a need for capacity development, including technical skills, including proposal writing. But Nadine and you made it very clear that this should not only be capacity building for compliance, that it fits to the needs of the donors, but it should be capacity really built so that you are creating and supporting partners that you can discuss and work with on an equal footing. Particularly NGOs as important partners need to enter into an equal partnership with local NGOs. You talked about localization of international agendas, such as the SDGs, to create a common platform and actually work on across the region with a similar thrust. Again, no copy and paste from other countries. It's good to learn from lessons learned and to know what worked, but it needs to be really fit to the local context and not just copy and pasted. And another interesting suggestion, I think it was also from Lebanon, that a national dialogue for all stakeholders and parties on how to do localization is one of the first steps to push the agenda forward. Then you closed with a number of thoughts, and I would just like to pull two out of it. I think there was a consensus that localization is important, it's possible, and that in a partnership with the different organizations on different levels together, you are actually on the way to one step at a time. Hero, you pointed out that it is indeed a long road ahead, and it's important to celebrate successes that are there in order to always have a medium and long-term view. I hope that I pulled at least some of the most important thoughts together. I think the rest of the bulk of the in-depth discussion is going to be coming in the report. So the discussion will be pulled together in a report that is available to everybody who registers on the Resilience website. And could I ask our tech team, please, to post the website again into the chat? Great, thanks a lot. The link to the website you can of course also access it by email if you have difficulties, but please write it down or make a copy now. Through your registration on the website, you will receive updates on the next sessions of the Resilience Dialogue, as it already has been mentioned. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank the panelists for their expert input. Thanks to the participants for your time, contribution, and the important questions raised. We look forward to continuing the discussions in the next online dialogue of this series. Please be sure to check it out on the website. One final note. This is the first online dialogue of a series. Hence, your feedback is really important to us, so that we are able to tweak the structures of the session as per your request. We have prepared a short poll with 5 questions that should take you actually not less than 2 minutes or less than 2 minutes to fill. The poll will be uploaded now. It is in 4 languages and pretty self-explanatory. Please fill it out. You will help us with the next dialogue series. Thanks in advance. Have a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.